Welcome to Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul, the podcast that transcends the boundaries between science and spirituality. Prepare to be uplifted, transformed, and awakened to create a path to healing your own life physically, emotionally, and spiritually by bridging the gap between science and soul. Welcome to Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul. Today's guest is someone who has been on this show a few times before. Her name is Felicia Bender, and she's also known as the Practical Numerologist. She uses numerology to validate and define your pathway and purpose in life in an empowered way that is fun, inspiring, and actionable. She is the author of several books and is the resident numerologist for astrostyle.com. Felicia is a go-to numerology expert featured in many media outlets, including the LA Times, Refinery 29, Women's Health, and more. So, hi, Felicia. I'm so honored to have you back on the show.
Oh, it's exciting. And we were both rather stunned that another year has gone by. Time is elusive, and it's really great to see you and have our time together as we prep and get ready for this upcoming year.
Yes, exactly. This upcoming year. I remember back in last year, right? In January last year, you said, this is going to be an 8-year for the Earth. So can you tell us a little bit what we just lived through with the Earth being in an 8-year, and then, what are we to expect this year, and what cycle is the Earth going into?
Well, this is great because I also wanted to say up front that if though any of your listeners are new to numerology, maybe they're like, I don't even know what they're talking about. So I would like to just do a very quick what is numerology, because numerology is basically an ancient science art, interpretive art of numbers. Basically, the kind that I use comes from Pythagoras. There are other forms of numerology, but what I'm talking about today comes from Pythagoras. And it's basically the concept that numbers carry with them a frequency, and they carry data, code, information whenever they show up, right? And it's interesting because I think we're a little bit more easily able to wrap our brains around it in our technological age, right? that and yet it is that idea that numbers are code. And so whenever they do show up, they do carry that information, and they also carry what influence, right? They influence the energy. So it is an energetic exchange as well. So when we talk about numerology on a grander scope, like we're talking about today, in cycles of time, right? Because in numerology, we can look at very much similarly, like we can in astrology. We can take your full name as it appears on your birth certificate and your date of birth, and we can formulate an entire numerology chart or profile that gives you an idea of what your purpose is, how you're going to go about it, challenges, tendencies, cycles of time, all of that. So what we're really focusing on today is a very specific cycle of time, and this is called the universal year. So the universal year, basically, what is that? It's kind of like what it sounds like. It is, what is the universal energy? What is the global energy that we are all experiencing? Again, all of us collectively. So the universal year is very easy to add up. You take the year. So we're going to use next year, 2025, or depending on when you're listening to this, but 2025. So you go 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5, that equals 9. All right. So we're heading into a 9, and yet in 2024, we've been in a number 8. And as you referenced last time we were talking about it being a very a power-centric year, right? Power struggles, all that goes with that, a lot about finances, a lot that the 8 is in numerology, often known as the money number. So any of you out there who've heard about numerology, you're like, ooh, the 8, I remember that. That's all about money, and so it is. And yet it's mostly, even before it's about money, it's about power. And on the higher level of that, it's about empowerment, right? So this entire year that we have been globally, and when I reference a universal year, I like to say you can gauge it more about what's going on politically. What is going on in terms of what are our key issues globally with global politics? Is it oil and gas crisis? Is it inflation? Is it wars and military actions? Is it, all of those things begin to formulate into the energy that we're really focusing on during a given universal year, and the energy that's supporting us in making positive shifts, right? It's never punitive. Or it's not supposed to be punitive. And yet we do have free will and we have choice in this. And oftentimes we have to get to a certain place before we can look around and see where we don't want to be, right? I mean, what do you think about that? Are you seeing that as we are here? So last year was about power plays. Again, we've had a very pivotal election in the United States. We have wars going on outside of the United States at this moment. We've got many other, weather conditions that are calling our attention. All of these things are kind of snowballing into okay, people, we need to make some different determinations. And this really colludes and collides those of you who are interested and know about astrology, because we're moving into a more significant timetable. Pluto has been in Aquarius in pardon me, back up. Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, just left on November 19th. 2024, moving us into what many astrologers are saying is the true age of Aquarius. So Pluto is moving into Aquarius and pushing these concepts, aspects, and values, right? And Aquarius is about the collective. It's about the community. It's about technology, all of those things. So it's no mistake that AI is out of Pandora's box, right? Like it, don't like it, approve, don't approve, whatever it is, it's here to stay. So we're working at how to integrate that into our lives among so many other things, right? So last year was the beginning, 2024, of a 3-year, very significant transition cycle globally and universally. So this was about power. Basically, if we're just going to have one word that's going to, talk about that or describe that. Now, what is a 9? In numerology, we're working with the numbers 1 through 9. And there are derivatives thereof, and yet 1 through 9. 1 is starts, it's new beginnings, right? It's all about number 1, right? It's the first, it's initiation. The 9 is the bookend of that energy or that number, and it is about endings. It's about conclusions. It is a very spiritually mature and wise vibration. And when it shows up, it is really pushing us more into nudging, inviting us into a more elevated sense of selfless service, of doing things for not personal gain or for power or for control or for all of that. It's more about what is going to serve the collective good, what is going to serve humanity as a whole. So the 9, when it shows up like it's showing up now as a universal energy, it is going to guarantee losses, significant feelings of loss. And what I mean by that is that the old paradigms are no longer standing, right? They're no longer functioning. And so the 9-year is where we are asked to allow things to fall away that are no longer serving an evolutionary function. in our lives. And in this way, it's not serving an evolutionary function for planet Earth and for human beings as a whole, right? So the energy here is very much about allowing that dissolution to happen. The issue with it is, like most things that we humans experience, we want certainty. We want something stable and predictable, or at least we think we do, right? And we want something solid that we can touch and feel, and we want something familiar, right?
Mhm.
The 9-year pushes that all. It's kind of the visual I'm getting right now. It's like you're standing there playing billiards, and you've got all the billiard balls, and you're doing the break, at the beginning. Any of you have played pool, played billiards, and it's breaking it all apart in order to move it into different pockets, different holes on the table. And so in many ways, that's what we're prepping to experience in the 9 personal year. It is it's a very challenging time emotionally, and it's a very challenging time for most of us who are very, very uncomfortable when we are uncomfortable, right? We don't like being uncomfortable. We want comfort, but that's not where we grow, and that is not where we flourish. We must have things, unfold and fall apart, right? So, in many ways, the 9 universal year is asking all of us to be in this very liminal space. And what do I mean by liminal? It means that you're sitting, and not sitting particularly, you're existing in a place of liminality, which is of nothingness. And so it's kind of an ultimate, this is when we can really begin to, I don't mean to sound too, lofty. And yet when you talk about the 9, you really can't avoid the high spiritual calling that it's calling upon us to engage with. So it's asking us to engage in the higher forms of universal wisdom, and that true knowing, that I remember Tom Hanks saying many times, he said the thing that he wishes he would have known is that this too shall pass, right? So it is truly that this too shall pass. And yet how do we solidify our own values, our own ethics, our own, boundaries with that, while also allowing things to fall down, fall away, dissolve, go in ways that we don't necessarily approve of, right? And change our world in the way that we have known our worlds. So, to make the most out of this 9 personal year, we're going to be asked collectively to let go. It's kind of like plain and simple, but there's nothing plain or nothing real simple about it, right? We are going to have to let go of old ideas, of old senses of the way systems work, of our identities within those systems. All of those things are really coming up to be shaken up and to be reshuffled in some way. It's also a time where we are being invited to focus on what is best for the collective. And because this is where we are, there will always be opposition, right? It's not going to be easy breezy. And it's funny, when I was thinking about, speaking with you today, I did bring out a little Eckhart Tolle, okay? Because you got to lay on a little Eckhart Tolle when you're really getting into the weeds in terms of our spiritual life, because this is where those of us who are light workers, those of us who feel that we have a spiritual calling and everything else, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. for all of us, because it's kind of easy when we're on our retreat and when we're, when we're in optimal conditions to be super spiritually. But when the world is tumbling down, that's when our practice really becomes a practice, doesn't it? And I'm not lecturing. I'm experiencing it just like everybody else. So, but Eckhart Tolle in his book A New Earth, and I'm going to quote this from him because I love it for this timing. He says, there is a new earth arising, a world where the ego state of consciousness in its insanely dysfunctional manifestation, both individual and collective, has dissolved or at least subsided, and where humans no longer create unnecessary suffering for themselves, one another, as well as other life forms on the planet. And he goes on to say that acute crisis and dysfunction always precede or coincide with any evolutionary advancement or gain in consciousness. And if there's any takeaway about the 9 universal year, that is it. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, very fitting.
Yes. So it's about, this is a time where the tide is out rather than in. So collectively, when we're trying to really, really dominate and make things like we did in an 8-year, when it's all about just following up on the follow up on the follow up, doing. This is more of a time that I always visualize. It's more like you've been in this, I don't know, canoe. Say you're in a canoe and you're 9, and in the 8 you were like paddling, you were going up the river, it's kind of against the current sometimes and all of that, and you had to do that to get to where you wanted to be or your destination. Now if you're in that same canoe, then we switch into that 9 in the universal cycle, and it's where we collectively put those oars inside the boat. And now we can go, I've done what I can do in terms of force, in terms of will. Now let's see where the current is going to take me. Let's trust that we now are that we've directed ourselves into the correct stream. And it's going to take us where we are meant to go. So it's less about about making things happen with certainty, and more about opening and allowing for things to come to you and to move away from you. So it is more about, again, letting go. And then the year after, 2026, is when we can begin to reconstitute with new ideas, new paradigms, new systems, new ideas, new concepts. But the other stuff has got to play out, has got to make an exit somehow, some way. So that is the overall trajectory. So the 8 is about power, and the 9 is about letting go and conclusions and letting things exit. And the 1 universal year is a new beginning, the beginning of a new 9-year cycle.
Yeah. So this is looking at the whole world, right?
Correct.
And the way we are going to interact with other countries and rules and regulations and humanity as a whole. I mean, it's really fascinating because we can see that struggle so clearly with the 8-year in so
Yes.
many different ways. And I mean, it's scary at the same time, right? We're letting go. We're letting go of what, right? Kind of gives
Right.
you that. But I'm used to this system. I've been in this system, but there's always good things that come out of it. It's because, right?
Yes.
And it's very encouraging to hear you say it's kind of like you're engaging in the higher universal wisdom, and it's for the collective. It's for all of humanity that like we're finally raising our consciousness and becoming more compassionate to other human beings in other countries, and just re-evolve the world to be a better place for all. So,
Right.
yeah.
And it's interesting because I dare say many of us, me included, it's like, well, uh, good luck with that, I mean, or by looking at what's going on in the world, it doesn't seem like we're winning, right? In that way, and I'm using air quotes there, and yet it is my understanding, and it is my deep-seated trust that that just like Eckhart Tolle observes, these sorts of very profound changes do not take place without a ruckus, and without those very diametrically opposed systems, belief systems, all of those coming head to head with each other. So rather than it kind of, moving around in a more subliminal way, it's really being all thrown on the table right now. And it feels like a lot, and it is a lot. And yet it's as though uh, we can't just keep putting band-aids on things. I think that's what the universe is always saying. It's like we got to look at the whole system. We can't just keep, putting a little bit of, I don't know, caulk on the side. We can't keep using a little duct tape, that is gonna keep this structure afloat. We have to really look and see what we really want to, if we want to revive this, if this is a structure, a belief, however you want to, conceptualize that, or if we want to, in a pure Aquarian way, if we want to go, hey, this doesn't work anymore. This isn't valid anymore. This does not speak to our current condition as human beings, as where we are, here in time, space, and dimension. So what can we do to shift this paradigm to make it more contemporary and to meet our actual current contemporary needs as human beings and as a human global community?
Yeah, so that's the year of the Earth, right? A 9 year. But then we also have our own personal year. So it's like that's the year for the Earth, but then I'm not going to be in a 9 year next year. I'll be in a 6 year, right? Six
Yes.
personal year. So then we have the personal year on top of it, where there are certain things that's going to happen in my life, right? Being in the 6 year versus other people being in a different personal year. Can you talk a little bit about what that personal, what is a personal year? How do you figure that out? And what does that mean for people?
Absolutely. And I love having this. It's as though the universal year is global, like we're saying. So it's certainly the playing field we're on, right? The container that we're in, right? So it really is useful to understand that. And yet, yes, here we are, all individuals, and we have our daily lives. So you can be as politically oriented as you would like to be, and yet we must live our daily, and take solace in that, and feel purposeful and empowered within that. So that's where the personal year comes in. So the personal year is the more immediate energy that all of us feel. And it's a very easy way to calculate that. So what you would do is take your month of birth. Do you mind if we take your month of
Yeah.
birth? Let's do that.
Yeah.
So
May
share.
28th.
So May 28th, we do not need your year of birth in the personal year calculation. So put that aside. We're only going to look at your birth month and birth day. So if you're out there listening, if you're driving, just do this in your head. Please wait till later. Or because it takes a little bit of brain power, but not terribly much. So You would take May, which is a 5. It's the 5th month. Then you take the day, which is 28th. In numerology, we are always reducing to a 1-digit number. There are some exceptions, and yet overall, that's what we're doing. So then we would take the 28th. So you take 2 plus 8. That equals 10. And then you continue to do the math that would take you to a reduction of to a 1-digit number. So 1 plus 0 equals 1. All right. So now we're going to, if you want to know the personal year that you are going to have for 2025, we do just what we did with the universe. So you just add the universal year, basically. So you take 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5, that equals 9. Now you're going to add together those 3 numbers. So 5 plus 1 plus 9, and that equals 15. Then 1 plus 5 equals 6. So in this example, it is a 6 personal year. So you can do this for your own, for your family members, for your, significant friendships. It's always really interesting to know what people who you care about, what they're going through in a personal year. So in very briefly, kind of the little nutshell for each of the personal years, if it goes 1 through 9, and then comes back around. So if you're in a 1 personal year, it is the beginning of a cycle. You just experienced a 9-year last year if you are in a 1 personal year. So you're in the middle of this. In the 9-year, you're in the middle of a 3-year transition. In the 1 personal year, this is where I say you're planting seeds. It is the beginning of a brand new cycle, new beginnings, initiation. It's going to test your sense of independence. Often this is where the fog starts to lift, where you've been like, nothing I've been doing is is moving forward. I've had all these, kind of emotional experiences. And now the things hopefully have made an exit to make room for these new ideas, new people, new opportunities, new experiences to come into play. And you've got to be pretty directive about what you want to see bloom and blossom and grow that you're planting in your 1 personal year as you move through your 9-year cycle. So that's a 1 year. A 2 personal year is designed as a little bit of a breather, right? It sounds good, and yet those people who are kind of type A, right, who are doers, the 2 personal year can be a little bit challenging because it's asking you to rest. It's asking you in many ways, metaphorically, to tend to what you planted in the 1 personal year. And yet, as we all know, anyone who's planted anything, that you're not doing that, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. You plant it, you watch it, you make sure there's some sun, you water it, you weed it. But what are you doing, when you're just hanging out and watching it? It's a time where you're really paying attention to your relationships. It's an us year rather than a me year. It's a great time to spend extra time with family members, with people you love. In your business world, it's a great time to have true networking. It's where you're going to be really asking yourself, who do I really want in my tribe? Who do I really want in my network, right? And it's a great time, again, for relationships. The challenge is that it's very slow. It can be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. It's asking you to be very patient and trust in the timing, because it's about the timing. And I always say in a 2-year, it's kind of like you're pregnant and you don't want you at month 5 or 6, usually you're like, oh my gosh, could I please, just I think I'm done with this. But you don't want to be done, because that's not going to be a fully gestated child. So you must wait for the entire gestation period, and it can be a little annoying, right? Toward the end, when you're like, I'm ready for something to happen. I'm ready for this. So that can be a feeling that you get in a 2 personal year. So a 3 personal year is all about your creative energy and your expressive energy. It's a great time for socializing. It's a year for what I would call self-improvement, but it's less about self-improvement and more about regaining your sense of authenticity. So on the one hand, it can feel very emotional. There can be a lot of things that come up where, I mean, it's a great year for therapy, a great year for the work that you do, in terms of clearing some ancestral karma, doing some of these related modalities that can really get some healing going on for that. If you are an artist, a creator, it's a great time for content creation, writing the book, getting the coursework, doing those auditions, making writing your songs, whatever it is, great for that. And it can be a little bit of an emotional roller coaster in a 3. So a 4 is implementation time. All the things that you worked on creating in the 3, now it's time to get down and dirty. Time to get serious. Time to, like, you wrote your book and it's all ready. Now you get to market it. Now you get to do the program that goes with it. Now that you've got to do all the step-by-step systems that are going to come into place for that. It's also a time to deal with family issues, where also the 4 is about stability. It's about foundations. It's about structure. It's about feeling anchored. So it can be a time where you move, where you renovate your house, where you try to figure out, do I even feel at home in my own body? Right? So there are different ways that can show up. But the 4 feels more serious, a little bit arduous, and there can be some limitations that you feel during a 4, but it's about the step-by-step process that it's taken to get from here to there. And a 5 year, and you're just kind of coming out of that, right? Or in your 5 year, you can talk to us about this because it's up close and personal. But the 5 is in the midpoint of this 9-year cycle. So the 5 is a very catalytic year. It's a year of change. And it is a year of changing circumstances. It can feel very much like a roller coaster, like so much coming at you, so many new experiences, new people, new this, new that. It can be a great time for traveling. It can be just a great time for just opening to the experience. I always say the 5 personal year is your year of saying yes. I don't know if you've ever read that Shonda Rhimes, her year of saying yes, but go to her TED Talk, or is it her TED Talk? I'm not sure if it's a talk, but she wrote a big piece and talks about her year of saying yes. And if you're in a 5, that's a great one to reference. And as you kind of get toward the end of it, you begin to resituate and have a brand new focus. So would you say that things are so much different for you right now, right here, right now? We're not even at the end of it for you than they were at the beginning. I mean,
Yes, absolutely. Everything changed. So right, so many new opportunities. It just resonates and makes me think back to all the different years. Oh my gosh, that year I was in a 1 year, that year I was in a 2 year, right? And it makes perfect sense looking back at it. And yes, this 5 year has been like a roller coaster ride, and definitely lots of opportunities of saying yes and going for it and meeting new people, new organizations, new platforms, and new way for me to work and teach, and moving into more of a teaching role as well. So I definitely hear what you're saying. It is so spot on. And
yeah,
especially when you look back too, it makes me laugh because when you look at astrologically, not that I'm an astrologer, but astrologers have told me, and you can see the cycles astrologically and also via numerology of what each year brought, right? It's
yeah.
fascinating. It's like a
Yep.
little movie script.
It is, and it's a beautiful framework to look at, to give us what is really being supported, right? It's oftentimes we simply need that permission, and the guidance around it. And what I will say also is that I did not talk, and I will talk as briefly as possible about the personal year and when it happens, because I've always talked about two schools of thought. I'm a numerologist that talks about different schools of thought, and it's up to us to figure out what feels right and works for us. Every modality is like that, right? I think about that. For instance, I'm born on July 22nd. And some astrologers, to reference back to astrology, again, I'm not an astrologer, but I love astrology because it really colludes and collides with the numerology. But some astrologers consider me a Leo and some a Cancer. So who's right? I have to decide. I'm the one who gets to decide what I consider myself to be, and yet I'll look at kind of both and get my arms around it. So the same with numerology. And for the personal year, I've just been working with more and more clients who are feeling that that the second mode of thought kind of works for them. So I just want to bring up briefly that the first school of thought is that the personal year runs from January 1st through December 31st of any calendar year. It intensifies around your birthday and kind of peaks in September. Now, the second mode of thought is that it is more, if we reference again astrology, more like a solar return. It runs from birthday to birthday. Okay. So in that case, you would calculate your personal year by the year of your last birthday. So when you experience your last birthday, that is what personal year you're in. And then when you reach your next birthday, it will click over into the other one. It's a little less fluid that way. It takes a little bit more about, okay, how does this really work in terms of the personal month and all of that? But it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're born in January or February, it's a little bit cum se cum sa. I mean, we can really drill down into it, but at the same time, but if you're born in May, if you're born in, mid-year or something, sometimes it's worth considering and step back and kind of, draw it out on a piece of paper and see how it feels to you. Because in that case, you would still be in a 5 personal year until May 28th, 2025. And then you would be moving into the 6. So we'll have to chat about that and
Right.
as the year goes by, right? So it's an interesting thought that I wanted to throw out there for those of you who are calculating your own. And yet to go back to the personal year descriptions here, the 6th personal year is after that kind of wild and woolly 5, very sensual. Also, it's a very sensuous year in terms of experience. The 6 is more about home, family. It feels a little bit more dutiful. Things come in to call upon you in terms of your attention to family, to relationships. It can be colleagues, it can be friends, all of that. The question that you're asking during a 6 personal year is, how do I love? And how do I want to be loved? So it's a very reflective year about relationships. And mostly it's the relationship with yourself, because at this point in your life, as you enter into a 6th year, you've gone through some pretty interesting changes in those first 5, right? So now you get to reevaluate your relationship with you, and then it reverberates out to everybody else. And I always say the theme song for the 6th personal year is, "Should I stay or should I go?" Remember that song? Should I stay or should I go? Or should it stay or should it go? It's very much an evaluation of what is benefiting you in terms of your relationship life. It's also centered around home and family, and that can, be across the board. It can be a time for weddings, for graduations, for important anniversaries, birthday parties, all those sorts of things. It can be a time of moving, beautifying your house, your garden, your landscape, all of those things. And for business, very magnetic, especially if you're in a service industry that serves anything of that nature that has to do with the home, with family, with relationships, with that sort of thing. So the 7 personal year after that responsibility laden year, it is your ticket, your hall pass to contemplate your own navel. Okay, for the 7 personal year is really designed as a kind of pause. It's the 7 is a spiritual number. It's spiritually activated. It's a spiritual seeking number. This is a soul searching, soul seeking year where we often feel even a little bit more lower energy, more introspective. It's about learning, gathering knowledge. It's not about doing, and it's not about forging ahead full all cylinders, especially with business. Usually this is a time where things don't accelerate a great deal. And it's really good to know that. It's like, okay, I'm pushing, and I'm just so frustrated. Mid-year, nothing's happening. Well, this is a time where you're reevaluating who you are, what your values are. It's a spiritually activating evolutionary time, and yet it is slow and digestive. So it's more of a time of going on a retreat, a sabbatical, learning more spiritual tools. Some things can happen during this time that push you toward the questioning. That can feel uncomfortable, right? That push us in that direction. But mostly it's a time to really get to know thyself in a very deep level, do some shadow work during this time. If anyone knows what that is, it's just working with, those deeper, darker elements of yourself and giving yourself the time to do so. Then after that, you're moving into, because you'll want to bottle some of that energy, I'm telling you. Don't resist it, because you're going to need some of that, because you're heading into the 8. And then remember, the 891 is a very much of a push time. It is an accelerated period of time where you're doing a lot of changing. So the 8 is more about putting this new you into action. And it's all about you're going to go to bed every night and wake up every morning thinking about your finances, thinking about, all that goes with that. And this is a time where it's kind of like boot camp. Where is the weakest link in your life? During an 8 personal year, you bet your bottom dollar that is going to be up in your grill. Is it relationship oriented? Do you need to, on the other side of the pendulum, do you need to go to rehab? Do you have alcohol problems, drug problems? What's going on there? Get serious about it. Or it could be much more subtle than that. But I'm using examples because sometimes people really are experiencing that when they head into an 8, and this is your time. It's take it seriously or it will take you down, right? And an 8. Fabulous time for when you're in it to win it in that way, when you're really, it's financial rewards, remuneration, but it can be up and down and all around. Very empowering year, but it's going to make you work for it. It really makes you work for it in an 8. And then you get to the 9. After that, you've done, go, make it happen, make it work, all of that. Now you let all that go and kind of ride on the trail of that. And the 9 is more about, okay, what needs to make an exit? What needs to go as we're prepping and getting ready for this new and evocative cycle that you're going to be heading into in your 1 personal year. So the 9 can be very tumultuous. It can feel, I'm just going to be honest, it can feel very emotional, dramatic. There can be dramatic changes during a 9. There can be a divorce. There can be a job loss. There can be, other things. And I'm not saying that as oh my gosh, people get so scared. And it's not a matter of scary things. It's things that happen to all of us. It's just, when did they happen and what is their purpose and what is their meaning? And again, it's never meant to demolish you. It is meant to break you open in a way that is bringing more of who you truly are and um, what your true potentials are, and bridging you into that. So often this can be a real game changer in terms of that sense of loss that can happen during a 9 personal year. And yet it's also a year where if you're ready for that, dreams can come true. It's like if you're it's silly to even say it out loud, and yet I think it's useful. It's like, so you ever know someone who has just been griping and complaining about the job they hate for years?
Mhm.
Suddenly in a 9 personal year, guess what? They get fired. They're like, oh my God, I lost my job. I'm so afraid. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is what you've been wanting. This is, as Abraham Hicks would say, this is the rocket of desire that you've been placing into the universe. I hate my job. I wish I didn't have it. Oh, okay. And the universe goes, okay, you don't have to have this job, and it'll take the job away, right? So it's that momentary, oh my God, that we have. And then it's that freedom of, oh, what's next? How can I reinvent myself? How can I redefine? How can I do it? And then it can gain traction in the excitement realm, right? It can be the same with a relationship. People who are in this horrible relationship, but they won't go because they're afraid of being alone. They're whatever, do the laundry list. And yet it may, come to a head in a 9 personal year. And it can be painful, it can be challenging, it can be uncomfortable, difficult. And yet at the end of the day, it's like, oh my gosh, best thing that ever happened to me. Right.
Mhm.
So those are the things that we can expect to experience on some level in the 9. And yet some people don't, it's not like, horrendous. Often people can really navigate the 9 and be ready for letting things go. And so it's a little bit, when there's less resistance, it's less painful in that way.
It's really fascinating to hear you talk about the different years. Right. So I'm going to go into a 6 year. So this coming year is all about, let's see, relationships, family, um, maybe moving, right? Should I stay? Should I go? What should I do? So it sounds like it's going to be maybe a little bit calmer than the last 2 years of it being in 4 and 5 year.
Yes.
Um, and then 7 sounds so nice. It's like a year of contemplating my navel. Like I get to like pause a little bit,
I
like,
know. I love that
right?
about you. You're like, okay, I'm paying my dues until I can hibernate,
Right.
right?
And then it sort of sounds like that it comes back. And then like 8, 9, and 1, it's like, here I go again. It's like I had
Yeah.
a little pause and whatever it is that's coming next, right, in my life, maybe writing my
Yes.
my second book or whatever it is that's coming. But
The
it's really
7
interesting,
is a
like
great year to write that book, by the way, just sidebar. So,
7, so that would be 2026. Yeah, that sounds about right, actually.
mhm.
Sounds about right. Um, yeah, it's really fascinating. Um, the cycles, and then it's almost like it gives you a little bit of a break. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
you had a really, stressful, and you did so many things for 2 or 3 years, and then you get a little bit of a break where you get to contemplate your navel, and then we start over again. I mean, it's like a little bit of a roller coaster, but it's
It,
it's
it,
almost like it's planned out. It sounds like it's very planned.
it
The
is.
way
And,
we
and,
get a little break here and there,
and
right?
in
And then the 2 year you
numerology,
also said was like a little bit of a rest year. So it's like now you just
yes.
finished 8, 9, and 1, and then you get to pause a little bit, and then you go into 3, and then you get, you know, again, the more things happen years.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you say that, because it is interesting to look at all of the numbers in line, in the lineup. And the 1 is all about initiation and doing. The 2 is more about us and about, slowing down. The 3 is creative, and the 4 is structured. So it bounces back. It's kind of like the yin to the yang, the yin to the yang, the yin to the yang that we go throughout the 9 years. And I also want to kind of piggyback on what you said, because for someone like you, you're like, oh, I can't wait for the 7, because, oh, this sounds so just lovely, luxurious in my mind. And other people would rather, throw themselves off of a 60-story building than have time alone. So it's like, even if we look at the 5 personal year that you're in currently, so many people will say, oh, this is so great because it's super sexy. It's like travel, it's adventure, it's shaking things up, it's like getting things kind of off kilter. People who are much more into their calendar and to showing up and the responsibility and the 5 personal year is hell, you
Mhm.
know? Other people, it's their heaven, and some people, it's their hell. It just depends on who we are and what. And so we're always getting these beautiful opportunities in our lives to expand ourselves, to open ourselves to new experiences and to shaking out some of the things that maybe we need to balance, right, a bit more or harmonize. I don't know if balance is truly possible, and yet harmonize is more of something that I like to think about. It's more of a harmonics that we can get going in our life about, it's great to be a hard worker. It's great to, be driven in that way, and yet not all the time. And to have a balance there, to be able to be a little bit spontaneous, to be a little bit flexible, to take in new ideas or new concepts. And so it's always really giving us these opportunities. And that's what I really want to also pinpoint is that we can talk all we want to about numerology, astrology, and everything else, and yet it's not words, it's energy. It's there, it is playing out, what it's playing out, its messages are there, whether we know it or not, whether we believe in it or not, anything like that. And I always like to think about numerology kind of as Morse code.
Mhm.
So if you think about it, you walk into a room, let's say, and Morse code is going off. Ba 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 da dee 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 dee. You don't know Morse code. And you're like, what's that annoying sound, right? You try to get out of that room as fast as you possibly can. You walk into the room and there's Morse code going off, and you know Morse code, you know the language. And you're like, oh my gosh, give me a piece of paper. I'm going to write that down. This sounds important. And it's that same sort of thing. The universe is always speaking to us. It's just speaking to us in a different language. And we simply need to acclimate ourselves to learn the language in some way. And numerology is very much that kind of language, so that when numbers show up anywhere in your life, it is messaging you. It's giving you a message.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating, and it's fascinating how it coincides with it. Like I read my astrological chart, not that I'm very wise in astrology, but it gives me enough knowing a little bit about numerology and astrology, and you can see how, I mean, the astrological chart tells me the same thing but in a different way, but it
Yes.
coincides with my year, right? That what
Yeah.
the planets are doing, the things I'm going through also coincides with the year I'm living through in numerology. So it's really interesting how it's literally like you want a script to your life, you want some kind of guidance of what's coming this year, then look in these charts, right? Because you're going to get that guidance. Though
Yeah.
I
It's
think
not
numerology
random.
is a lot easier to understand than astrology. Because astrology is like it's like learning a new language.
Mhm.
Numerology is easier, at least for me, because it's more just plain English. Like you can read your numerology chart and understand what's going on in a different way than astrology is a little bit more complicated with the planets having
Yes.
all the different positions against each other, which
Mhm.
I'm not good at that. So numerology is very easy to learn and very easy to grasp onto because you just get your chart from Felicia and then, or you get a session with Felicia, right? And then you know so much already
Yeah.
about who you are and what you came to do, and then looking at the different years you lived through. Now, you mentioned in the beginning, you have your name. So my real name is Anne Charlotte Valentine, but my nickname is Lottie or Dr. Lottie. Now,
Mhm.
would it make it does it make a difference when if people order your chart, if should they use their nickname or should they use their real name? Like if I made a chart, should I use what the name I'm using on social media or in interviews, which is this Dr. Lottie, or should I use my real name, Anne Charlotte?
Okay, that's a great question. I love this question because it is important. It's very, very important. And again, different numerologies value certain things differently. In Pythagorean numerology, the belief system here is that the original name as it appears on your birth certificate is it's the foundational matrix that you have come in to work with. Okay. And I know that it stretches some people's minds or belief systems. And yet we also believe that there are no mistakes, that you, even if, and it's interesting because I work with a lot of people and I've worked with many people who go back and look at their birth certificate and they're like, oh my gosh, this is spelled differently. Then I had a woman who, her husband, she had this happen. We redid, it was just one letter. And we redid it. And she's like, oh my God, this makes all the difference. It's really interesting to look at the spelling of the name. It's all, and again, I have had people who, for instance, a family member of mine, her birth certificate said one name, spelled one way, and then the announcement that her father put out spelled it the way he wanted it spelled. And it was spelled very differently. And she has always felt a very confused sense of identity throughout her life. And I find that to be a perpetuating factor with people who are adopted. And I think people come in, souls come in to have that experience. And please understand me correctly. I am not saying people that adoption is horrible and that it's traumatizing or nothing of the sort. I have people who have had amazing, are amazing people, amazing lives. They love their adopted family. They may even know their original biological parent, whatever it could be. And yet it is going to encode a certain level of searching. And often these people, excuse me, have sevens in their chart where they are doing the soul searching. They have master numbers where it's about this sort of more dramatic seeking as well. So in terms of names, we will look at your given name. It's always going to be foundational. Then we look at the first and last name that you currently go by. So in your case, we would look at your original name, and then we would look at the name that you take now. This happens, you see it with performers all the time. I mean, would Elton John be Elton John? Would he have had his fame if he had been, had been Reginald Dwight all his life? So it is about the sound. It is about the vibration. It is about sound that comes across. So we feel differently about ourselves if our name is Elton than Reginald, right? And I'm not saying Reginald's bad. I'm not saying Elton is good. I'm just saying it makes us feel different, right? And so those are things that we can very much dig into in a numerology chart. So while I find it's easier to understand in many ways in terms of the language than astrology, it offers an extraordinary depth and breadth of information about a person. I've worked with people who, again, were born as, baby girl Jones, and that's the name that we will use. That was the original name. And then 6 months later, they were adopted. And then we will definitely look at the adopted name after that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It makes sense. And I know the clock is just ticking, and we've been on here for almost an hour now. So what do you think is the meaning of life?
Oh, Dr. Lottie, you are so hilarious. The last 2 minutes, let's just talk about the meaning of life. So, no pressure. Oh, you crack me up. So, the meaning of life. Well, numerologically, not astrologically as well. I have found I've been doing this work for a long, long time now. And if I were to answer that question as succinctly as I can, it would be that I find the meaning of life is soul growth and soul experience. That our soul has dropped in here not to just sit around and watch TV all the time. Our soul has come here to have as many incredible, intense, varied experiences as it can possibly accumulate while it's here on planet Earth. What I also have come to the realization is that the problem is the purpose. Because every single person who walks this planet feels like that they've had a hard life. They've had struggles, they've had challenges. Why me? And all of those things. And yet what I have found through numerology and through any spiritual practice, and I know a lot of wonderful, amazing modalities, and it all points to the same direction. That is, like, for instance, numerology points us toward, let's say you're a 3 life path. The 3 is about creative self-expression and emotional sensitivity. Guess what? Your entire life, you are going to be challenged over and over and over again till the day you take your last breath in that, because that's your course of study. And it's not meant to be done with. It's not meant to be perfected. It's not meant to be conquered. It is actually simply meant to be practiced and integrated and savored. It's when you have those moments of victory, if you're a 3 and you finally speak your truth. And that's going to be extraordinarily hard for you. And then you get to practice it again and again. You're going to be, and so I find that the purpose of life is to accumulate this experience and to really, the pain points are the biggest gifts, and they're the reason we're here. They're not to be avoided or to be bypassed or to be shoved down. They're actually the reason that we're here. And that is as soon as we can kind of get our brains wrapped around that, things change in our lives.
Yeah, it's like it makes you understand why it is that you're going through certain things. Sort of awakens you in a different way.
Exactly.
So, how can people learn more about you or work with you or find your books?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon where my books are at Felicia Bender. And then you can go to FeliciaBender.com. Everything is there. So we've got books there, courses, sessions, and you can also find me on YouTube. So I do have a YouTube channel where you can learn more about numerology.
And we'll make sure to put all the links in the podcast notes as well as on YouTube. So just go find those links and go learn more about your numerology and your path. So it's been such an honor to have you as a guest again, Felicia. So thank you so much for taking the time.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
As we conclude this episode, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your presence within my community. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, comment, like, and share this podcast episode. Join my free newsletter in the show notes and receive new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. If you resonate with the interconnectedness of mind, body, and soul, and are motivated to embark on a journey of personal healing, I invite you to connect with me at drlottie.com. Together, we can pave a path towards transformative healing in your own life.